right, welcome everybody. September 11th, 2021. Obviously, I don't need to tell you this is the 20th anniversary of a horrible day in the United States history. I'm going to bring my co host on here in a second. Just wanted to kind of talk about what this show is going to be. It's going to be different than what you normally hear. And not a lot of cards, probably. I know Chris Harris has a tie in to with cards to that day. But generally speaking, we're not going to be talking about a lot of cards. When I don't know if Val Mars, who does our scheduling, NASCAR Radio, I don't know if he did it intentionally or not, but he scheduled me on today's show. And being a New York City kid, born and raised, I thought it was sort of apropos. I'm going to give him credit. I don't know if it was unintentional, intentional, but however it shook out, here we are. When I knew the show was going to be literally on the day of the anniversary, I just didn't feel like it was a day to really talk a ton of cards and just sort of, especially being the 20th anniversary, just talk about that day, how our feelings and thoughts about it. We will take call-ins if you want to share your remembrances of that day, or if you have a personal connection or story to that day or since then, by all means. I think talking about it sometimes is a good thing. And, it happened. We can't rewrite history, but we can also honor it as well. Those people that were lost in Shanksville, New York City, and Washington. So with that being said, again, a different episode. If you were really expecting heavy cards, it's one day. I apologize, but I didn't think today was the day. So I'm going to bring all my co-hosts on. Brad Bethune, Texas Card Dude, Logan Ward, and Chris Harris. Welcome, gentlemen.
Morning.
Good morning.
So I'll kind of go into sort of my day 20 years ago. I had went on a cruise to the Bahamas. A friend of mine got married on a cruise ship, and we were in the wedding. And to be honest with you, my flight back, mine and my wife's flight back, was supposed to be on September 11th from Florida back here to New York. And I got sun poisoning on the trip from snorkeling, like a bad case. And we actually cut our trip short a couple days, and we were supposed to be in Florida for a couple days, and we got an earlier flight. So I got back here on September 9th. On September 11th, I was supposed to be back to work, but with the sun poisoning, I called my boss and said, "Hey, can I have an extra day? Just to get through this a little bit." And he said, "Yeah, we'll see you tomorrow. If you need even an extra day, let me know." So I was home on that morning, and I was sleeping on the couch on my stomach because the sun poisoning was on my back, and the TV was on Channel 3. And today's show, I believe, if my memory serves me correct. And I was kind of waking, sort of semi-waking up. And you can hear things. You're not fully awake, but you hear things. Well, I hear Matt Lauer, I believe it was, remember him, say, we're getting reports that a small plane has crashed into one of the World Trade Center towers. And I'm a New York City guy. That literally, woke me right up. I started watching. I called my father, who's also from New York, and said, "Pops, I don't know if you have the TV on, but put the TV on. A small plane crashed into the World Trade Center." And so we're watching the coverage while we're on the phone with each other, literally talking. This is, crazy. And then we were talking like, hey, this happened in the 40s. A plane crashed into the Empire State Building, a military plane. This is being reported as a Cessna type. Early reports were incorrect, obviously. And so we're literally on the phone, and we're watching the smoke billow out. And we're just talking like, oh, my God, I hope not too many people were hurt or worse. And literally, I'm on the phone with my father, as many of you will know, and we see that second plane go into the other tower, and few f bombs, uh, and we knew the first one was no mistake, and we knew uh, something crazy was going on the terrorist side, and reports came in from the Pentagon. And I was on the phone most of the day with family, other family and friends, being from New York, and just a crazy, feelings. Sad, obviously, mad, right? When you realize that this is not an accident, but someone is doing this intentionally. And knowing there were probably people, innocent people on those planes. We didn't know officially yet. And then, as things unfolded, to see those two towers come down was just a nightmare scenario. I don't even know how to describe, my feelings that day. Being a New York City guy, and again, I want to pay respects to all the locations: Shanksville, Pennsylvania, the heroes of that flight who brought that plane down before it reached its intended target. Um, the Pentagon, which lives were lost, but that could have been much worse too. And just a day. It's 20 years now, and it just seems, it doesn't seem that long, quite frankly, because of how traumatic it was. And the feeling of pride to kind of come together and be supportive of one another, knowing many people knew people who directly or indirectly, who were lost that day. I got involved in a lot of organizations, charities, and whatnot. And it's just a crazy time. I don't want to drone on, but that's my recollections of that day. And as we know, even past that day, it's 20 years later, it's still one of the biggest days in this country's history. Obviously, in a negative sense, but something I'll never forget till I'm no longer here. So I'll chime in a little bit more, but I wanted to get everyone else's. We all. I don't. Whether you're from New York or you're not from New York, Washington, it doesn't matter. That affected all of us as humans, and so I wanted to get everyone else who's on the panel their recollection of that day. If you have a personal connection or just want to speak similar to your own personal feelings on that day, call in and we'll bring you on. So I don't know who wants to go next, but go ahead.
Yeah, I'll go next. It's 20 years later, and I'm still pissed. I'm still, my blood every 9/11 still boils because when I was in I was in college, I was going to history of sport class, and the teacher was late, professor, coach was late, and we were sitting outside, and we were sitting outside the classroom, and somebody ran by and said, the tower's burning. The tower's burning. We're like, what tower? They said, the Twin Towers in New York. I said, everybody's going, you're full of crap. And when the coach got in, he was bringing in the TV cart, and we turned it on and watched. And about 2 minutes in, he said, y'all just go home. And I made it home and turned on the TV just as the second plane hit. And ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, I was madder than a hornet's nest because it was absolutely nothing I could do. I I went from that to crying, and still today I still shed a tear. Had I not had my heart condition, I would have signed up that day and send me over because I'm that. I got my grandfather was in the military. My father was in the military. I have family in the military. Still today, every time I look at the clock and if I see 9/11, I'll still stop and I'll still say a prayer and I'll still remember, because you don't mess with Texas, and I'm sorry you don't mess with Texas and Texas people. We can pick on one. I can pick on John. I can pick. You don't pick on us, brother. You just don't do it. So still today, I'm pissed. I'm still mad, and it's it's my small part, but it's an honor to be part of the remembrance today. That's all I got.
Go ahead,
Chris.
Walter.
Okay, I'll go ahead. I'm like John. It seems like this was just yesterday to me. I was going to work that day, and there's a road that goes through a park. It's a really long road here in Memphis, and there's never any. I mean, the traffic. There's some traffic, and it never backs up. And I'm going down the road, and for whatever reason that day, the traffic was backed up hideously. And I'm thinking, this is just so weird. And I had my radio on in my car on the News Talk radio. And I'm listening to it, and they break in with a special report. And they say, and this is, to me, this is still, it just rings with me every time I think about it. They said, apparently, there's been an accident in New York. Airplanes have crashed into both of the World Trade Centers. And I'm thinking, accident? How can you say that? I said, people have died, apparently, and this has got to be a terrorist act. I just couldn't believe the way they handled that, with the political correctness and all. I mean, it was apparent to, I think, everybody on the planet that when you have a plane crashing into each of the World Trade Centers, that is no accident, and that is a deliberate act against this country. And so I got through the traffic, got to the office, and at the time I was an engineer, a network engineer, and we had what we called our bullpen, where all the engineers were located, and we had the only TV in the building. We had a TV back there. So of course, when I get there, I'm a little bit late. Everybody's already back there, and everybody's in the office is huddled around the TV watching. And I get there, and I see these towers burning, and I was just in shock. I mean, just total, absolute shock. And my friends, I'm looking at them, and everybody has this horrified look on their face. And we got a couple of the ladies there that were crying, and we're thinking, oh my gosh, this is like the start of World War III. I mean, this is going to really, really be bad. And we're watching this thing unfold. And as I didn't see it, I guess I saw it out of the corner of my eye. But one of the, I was talking with a friend of mine, and one of the ladies standing next to me goes, "Oh my God, I think it's falling." And I look over at the TV, and all you see is all this smoke and everything, and you see the tower just going down. And we're like, oh, and I've got goosebumps on my arm right now just thinking about that. And I'm thinking, oh my God, all those people there. They say that the World Trade Center, I think, held like 50,000 people between the two towers. So I'm thinking, oh my God, there's tens of thousands of people that are dying right now. And I just broke down, and I just couldn't believe it. And we're sitting there, and of course, everybody, there's more crying going on. People are just in disbelief. And of course, it wasn't just a few minutes later, the second tower went down, and we're like, this can't be happening. I mean, there's just no way these towers can fall down. And it was just an absolute horrible day. I couldn't stop thinking about all the people that were there and all the possible lives that were lost. And I kept a journal of, being an engineer, I went out, like I'd go out to a certain location and write down what I did. Well, I remember writing in my journal that day that this is, one of the most horrible days for this country. And I think, maybe 20, 30,000 people may have lost their lives today. Luckily that did not happen. I mean, there was still a huge loss of life, and it's absolutely terrible. But it was just a day I'll never forget. It's a day that I'm having a hard time thinking about it right now. It was a horrible day. My heart goes out to all the people that were affected that day, the people that lost loved ones. I was watching some things on the History Channel last night, and they were talking about, they show some families and what they've been through, 20 years later. And it's gut wrenching. And my heart goes out to all those people. God bless all of them. And that's pretty much my recollection of the immediate events of that day.
The other thing too, Logan, thank you for sharing. The one thing we need to remember too, everybody, is the people that worked even after the fact, in which at first was an attempted rescue and then later become a recovery. Many of those fire department members, paramedics, rescue crews, they breathe in those toxic fumes, and many we're losing them to this day. So the effects, even though the big event happened on September 11th, people are still losing lives from cancer and various other respiratory illnesses. I watched a show, speaking of watching a show last night, Logan, I watched a show last night that actually focused on the folks that are still affected and losing their lives in the years after. And sometimes we forget about that. Like, we think everything happened that one day. It's a ripple effect. And, there was a fireman who on the show that looked like a shell of him former self. He wound up passing on. The one thing that struck me, the interviewer asked him, knowing the condition you're in now in your terminal, and you don't know how much time you got left, would you do anything different? And he said, no. Those were my brothers. I wanted them to try to get them even for closure for their families. And yeah, it sucks. I'm dying, but no, I wouldn't change it. To hear him, it just hit me. I had to walk out of the room.
Yeah, I saw that last night. They said that basically everything, when those towers collapsed, that everything was literally pulverized. And I remember seeing something a few years ago saying that the most resilient thing that survived the collapse were credit cards, of all crazy things. But the fact that everything was pulverized meant that you've got micro pieces of asbestos, you've got fiberglass, all the things that were put into the construction of that building were literally pulverized and put into dust, and people inhaled that dust, and that's going to have an adverse effect on anyone's health. And that was, like you said, the ripple effect of that was extremely bad, and people are still dealing with that to this day.
Yep, and dying. A little comment before we get to our other, Yakov Strauss, several of my friends changed the course of their lives and entered the armed forces because of this incredibly tragic event, and it's forever altered the way we live and think. A very sad day for a country and the world as a whole because of the error it ushered in. Let freedom and liberty be our guiding truth. Bless America and those that keep us free. I echo that. Now, real quick, another personal story. I was 29 when this happened, and you do some crying, And then other emotions set in. Like I already said, I got mad. I was mad. I wanted to do something. I wanted to, I hate to say it like this, get back at who did this heinous thing. And I remember telling my wife at 29, like, I want to join the military. I want to do something to help my fellow Americans. And she's like, you're 29 years old, John. I don't think they'll take you. And, I don't know if you'll pass the physical test, thanks, Sharon. But those emotions, right? Like, yeah, you don't want to stand on the sidelines. I got involved in other ways with community events and charities and donating and different charities to raise money for injured people and the rescuers that were dealing with some stuff afterwards, the recovery. That was my way. As much as I kind of wanted to get on the field, I couldn't. But yeah, so go ahead. I just wanted to.
John, that was before you got into the hot tub diet.
Yeah. I will say this, Rich. I was in better shape at 29 for sure.
So was I. Actually, I'm probably in better shape now than I was at 29. And we're joking, and we're all fortunate we can joke. And I always say there are 2,974 people and countless friends and relatives that can never joke about that day. And it's as you said, it's forever. And this is Hobby Hotline. And actually, and I checked with our gang, I was probably closer to the trade centers that day or the Pentagon than either Chris or you, because I know you grew up in Brooklyn. I thought you might still have been in Brooklyn. And Chris is in Washington, so I thought he might have been in Washington. But I was actually
I wasn't living in Washington back then. So
I was actually about 15 miles away from the trade center because I had gone up that weekend for a friend of mine's wedding, one of my hobby friends. And I remember he got married on Sunday. I was staying through Tuesday. And the reason I was staying through Tuesday was that this was I was American Gold at that time. And this is before what they were doing now with all the extra security. So being American Gold, I could go to my friend Mike Gordon's Tuesday night Parsippany card show and then get to the airport at 6:15 even with a rental car and make it to my 7:00 flight on time. So I was going to stay and make the flight. So instead of having an early morning flight, I was staying till 7:00. And so it's Tuesday morning. It's a beautiful day in New York. I got it. If you've ever seen it, it's an absolutely beautiful day.
It is.
Down here in Texas, we're going to have a beautiful day like that, a few degrees warmer, but a beautiful day. And I was staying with my father, and I was driving him to, he loved going to Pathmark to do his shopping, and he was going to be by himself. So, he's getting older, but I made sure we got all the stuff he needs. I'm driving him back. I'm on Outwater Lane in Garfield, New Jersey. And I hear, and I never remember if it's Harry Harrison or Dandy Dan Daniel on CBS FM say a plane has hit the World Trade Center. They don't have any more details than that. And my first thought was that it's an accident, because my first thought was in 1945, a plane hit the Empire State Building.
Yep.
And when you hit the Empire State Building, I think they think it was either an accident or a suicide, and not in the term that they use today, a suicide pilot, but a pilot who wanted to kill himself. And so, but I just thought that was an accident. So we get home, we turn on the TV to get some details, what's going on. And then, as Logan said, the second plane hit. And that's when I knew we had trouble. Plus, my dad didn't have cable. We had one TV station we could watch, CBS, Channel 2 CBS. All the others were gone. After that, we ended up getting cable or dish TV. My brother got dish TV for the house after I left and all that. So we always had something we could watch. But it was just so astounding to see what was going on that day. I mean, because if revolutions, what's the first thing that goes away in any revolution? All the places for communication. So I actually started thinking, were we under that type of attack too, where they were going after all the networks and all the things and really a coordinated attempt to take everything away? And the CBS helicopter, Channel 2 helicopter, was because because of what was going on, was still able to fly until basically they were going to be close to running out of gas where they could land. So those, you still had that one helicopter in the air with permission, by the way, to do that. And I started making some phone calls, and somebody said, by the way, you realize you do have a, because I was thinking, oh, I can't do this. You do have this commitment. Try to get back to Dallas. And that shook me out of what I was. I better start planning on how I'm getting back to Dallas instead of just staying up in New York and being like tranquilized by fear for 4 days. And so about 11 o'clock, I realized I'd have to start driving south for the third time. The second time, I drove south. I've never driven north from Dallas to New York, but I've driven south 3 times. It's really the kookiest thing, that never drive north, always drive south. And I get, my father and I do lunch. I go on my way. But it's just a stunning thing because it's me in a car by myself, knowing I'm going to my, in a sense, leaving one home, going to a different home. But it's just an absolutely staggering event. You're going to be by yourself for 22, 24, 26 hours on the road. And I'm not going to pick up any hitchhikers or anything because who knows? So, it's a staggering amount of time to really be reflecting. And you're not going to have anything interesting. When I say interesting, it was always interesting because a lot of the radio broadcasts I heard were very localized, we're going to have a pro-American demonstration. We're going to show our flags. And that was wonderful to hear. But you realize you're hearing that. And it's such an interest. And anytime a plane's flying overhead, I'm thinking, okay, do I have to start pulling over to the side and worrying about, is the drive going to continue? Or am I going to have to stop for an hour or two and wait for all this to clear? If you've never driven by yourself for 24, 26 hours over a period of 3 or 4 days, it's a totally interesting experience. And you get a lot of time to reflect. And it was a little bit scary. And, I know and I wasn't at the office, but I know from what was posted on our Beckett alumni group on Facebook, about 11 o'clock on 9/11, everybody's told, just go home. And for the next few days, people were still wandering in days. I get to the office Friday, and for a few days afterwards, we were still having daily prayers for all concerned, which was fine. It was important to process. And, I was very fortunate. I grew up in the New York area. As I said, I was up for a wedding. Ted Straka, who's a baseball card dealer, set up at the National, got married that weekend on Sunday to a lovely young lady named Teresa. In fact, they had a choice of 2 flights to take for their honeymoon. One had a layover in Chicago, and one had a layover in San Francisco. Well, the one that had the layover in San Francisco was Flight 93, but they didn't want to get up that early in the morning, so they ended up in Chicago. And hopefully someday Ted will tell you the story of the flight. He told me that once. I promised him I'd never repeat it. But hopefully someday he'll tell you the story of the Chicago flight. And it's just staggering to realize he and his wife going to their honeymoon could have been on Flight 93. And he probably would have been one of the guys saying, let's roll. I mean, it's just amazing. I was shocked that I personally knew nobody that perished on 9/11. I mean, because of where I was from. John, I don't know if you knew anybody from when you were growing up.
Indirectly. No one kind of second removed, almost like a second cousin.
Right. It's the same thing with me. It might have been 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, but it's the same principle. It's nobody I directly knew. But for months afterwards, and every once in a while I would go home or I would get a Sunday paper. One of the things the New York Times did, and this is a non-political statement here, but they did something absolutely astounding. They made sure they ran obituaries of every single person they could identify who passed on 9/11, and they were detailed obituaries. They were as if they were writing them about a famous person. And God bless the New York Times for doing that, because it really brought it home to so many people that every person was a person with a life story to tell. And, we've all told our stories, but it was just a day that is seared in my memory because our world changed that day. I was American Gold. I was going to be on a flight at 6. I was going to show up at the airport at 6:30 for a 7 o'clock flight. Can't do that anymore. I like to say, several times baseball cards saved my life. In this case, baseball cards really may have saved my life.
Yeah. Rich, you touched on something else that we have to acknowledge too. With that day, we saw then the other things happening in Pennsylvania, Washington, and like you said, we didn't know. You talked about communication being knocked out. You didn't know what was next. You didn't know if this was like a coordinated effort across the whole United States. So I remember just calling as many people as I loved and care about to find out. Even though we're watching the news and they're now on top of it very quickly, you're worried about other parts of the country. What's going on there? I'm here in Syracuse, and I live very close to the airport. Well, the Syracuse airport is dual purpose. It's also a military a hangar there. And so a couple hours after this event, I can hear the jets scrambling, and they are flying overhead here at Syracuse. Literally, I went outside, and they were just doing, I don't know, the military, just kind of surveillance, just flying in a pattern, almost like guarding Syracuse, guarding the city, as if they weren't sure if something was coming this way. I saw some of them take off and not do the pattern, but go somewhere, obviously probably to New York, Washington, or other cities as well, be deployed there. And so seeing this, being on the phone, it was just you really didn't know what was going to be next, if there was going to be a next, if this was as terrible as it was, if those were going to be the 3 sites only, or what else is coming down the turnpike. And it's scary. And for a grown man and grown people to be scared like that, it just tells you of the significance of the event. One thing I didn't get to do in sort of my open monologue. So, like I said, I did a lot of stuff, and still do, with some of the charitable organizations that revolve around that terrible day. I got to know a few people. And about 6 years ago, one of the firemen I got to know from New York City, I was at an event, and he pulled me aside and he thanked me for things I did. And he said, "I'm going to give you something. Please don't advertise it, at least not right away. Otherwise, other people might try to get it." He gave me a piece of rebar from the World Trade Center. It sits on my desk every day, folks. It's right here. I don't know if you can see it. Coated with dirt. Sits on my desk every day, not just today, but every day since I got it about 6-7 years ago. And to me, it's a daily reminder to remember that, those people who woke up that day, went to work at the Pentagon, boarded those planes, went to work at the World Trade Center, kissed their loved ones goodbye, put their kids on a bus or brought them to school. Those folks didn't know, that was going to be it that day. Those firemen who are rushing in when other people are rushing out, and not just firemen, paramedics, and other service personnel, knowing that it might be potentially a one-way trip. You hear the phone calls of people saying goodbye just in case, and unfortunately, in many of those cases, it was goodbye. And so this, every day I look at this at some point, more than one time, and I just know that every day is not guaranteed to anybody, and to live life to its fullest. Tell those folks that you love them. Thank people when they do things for you, and be appreciative. You just don't know. You just don't know. So,
John, I got to drop off. I got to drop off, guys.
All right.
Y'all have a great day.
Have fun at the Rough Riders game tonight.
I don't know if I can go now, but have a good one.
All right.
Man, it's tough. I feel bad. Like I've choked up a few times today. It's 20 years and it still gets me, and if I'm having even a bad day, I'll think about, those people that had a really bad day, and it puts things in perspective. And like the hashtag says, never forget. I won't. I know most other people will not as well, and so I wanted to share that. But Chris, I know you have a little bit of a sports card tie-in with
Yeah,
with
my
the company
9/11
on your
story
shirt.
does have a card angle to it. So, and it's a story that I've already told on back when I was actively blogging. So if you want to read along on stalegum.com, it's still there. Not every 9/11 I kind of boost it to the top. So um, in 2001, I was still living in South Jersey, and I had a job that I didn't particularly care for and was looking for some new opportunity. And that was the first year I went to the National, and it was in Cleveland that year. And well, actually, it was the second National I went to. I went to the one in Atlantic City when I was a kid, but this was the first real National that I went to. And I made my way to the Fleer corporate area. And just on a whim, I asked one of the guys behind the counter, "Hey, I live in South Jersey. Do you have any openings?" And I told him who I was. And this is around the time that my website, Stale Gum, was kind of, it wasn't necessarily the blog that it would become. It was more of what we called back then a webzine. I updated it maybe once or twice a month, just giving my opinions on the state of trading cards. But when I mentioned that, I think the guy behind the counter I was talking to kind of knew who I was. And he gave me his card, and it was a guy named Jim Stefano. And he was one of the product development guys at Fleer at the time, and he's kind of bounced around the hobby since then. I think he was last with Panini a couple of years ago. I think Rich might actually know
He is
more
still with
about
the
that.
hobby. I think he may be with Golden Auctions now. I'm not.
Yeah, I heard he might have gone to Golden. So.
Let me see if I can still. Let me see if I can find him and get you a definite answer.
Well, anyway,
He's actually he's still at Panini.
yeah, he's still at Panini. Okay. So he seemed interested, and he said, "Give him, when you get home, give me a call. We'll see if we can set something up."
Oh, Chris,
And,
to interrupt, Jim is actually both with both Panini and Golden Auctions. So we're
and
both.
Golden. So
He sort of splits. He does some for both,
okay.
according to his LinkedIn profile. So wherever it is.
Okay. So after a couple of weeks of phone tag, we finally set a day and a time for my job interview at Fleer Trading Cards. And it was going to be on the afternoon of Tuesday, September the 11th, 2001. So needless to say, that didn't happen. I finally got that job interview a couple of weeks later. I got to tour the Fleer facilities, which was pretty fascinating. And I never heard from them again. So I'm still waiting to hear back from them if they have a job opening at Fleer. Yeah, so that's my 9/11 story. And if you want to read more, if you want to go into detail on it, I wrote something a couple of years ago. Let me bring it up.
It's 5 years ago. I already read it.
Yeah, you already read it.
I already read it.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
it's there if you want to read it. I'm gonna knock it up to the top of the page when I'm done. So I actually first learned about the 9/11 attack while I was on my way to breakfast that morning by listening to the Howard Stern show. So I think a lot
That's
of
your first
people.
mistake. I cannot listen to Howard Stern.
Well,
I mean, because ever since he made fun of the plane crash in Washington, D.C. in 1982, I have trouble listening to Howard Stern.
yeah. Well,
He's
I
brilliant.
was in
Don't
that
get me
Stern
wrong.
demographic back then. So.
Yes, don't get me wrong. Hey, I was the part of the demographic at the time he was, but when what he did after that horrible plane crash, I just could not listen to him anymore. I never could get into listening to Howard Stern. I had trouble listening to Don Imus too. So it's those type of guys that I just can't listen to. Imus later became a respected political and news junkie, so he it became a little easier. But those type of guys I just can't listen to. But that's me. But so was the $20 for breakfast worth it?
I didn't even know I was going to be able to get across the bridge back home. So I guess so.
Well, look, you're worried about getting across the bridge. I'm worried about being able to drive 24 hours back to Dallas.
To Dallas, yeah. So.
Yeah. One other thing I want to add, those of you who know may have know on June 4th, I lost my brother Stephen, and he was in Brooklyn, like me, grew up in Brooklyn. He was in Brooklyn at the time of the event, and he was one of the volunteers. He wasn't in the fire department. He wasn't. He wasn't a paramedic. There's something below a paramedic. He had some medical base knowledge, but he went to ground zero, I believe, for a week or two to help in the recovery. I would talk to him almost every day about that. Very moving. And so that's my we lost Steve on June 4th, not because I didn't have an illness as a result of he wasn't in good health, but it wasn't due to his 2 weeks at ground zero. But that was the kind of guy my brother was. When we had that earthquake in 1989 in San Francisco during the World Series, I was 17. He was 21, and he flew from New York City on his own dime to California. And I think he spent 6 weeks out there helping those folks in California rebuild or recover from the earthquake. So when it happened in his own backyard, he went right down the ground zero. I called him. I talked to him almost every day. I'm like, I'd like to, can I come down there? He's like, no, I got it. There's a lot of people here, John, he owned his own business. So I can do this. You're working. You can't leave work. I'm here for both of us, and we'll talk every day. And so, whenever this day comes around too, I always, and now that he's not here any longer, even more so, I think about kind of person he was to, like I said, go to California in 1989, and then ground zero after 9/11, and do whatever he could. And there's a lot of stories of people like that. And again, like we said earlier, many of those cases, some of those folks are suffering today from illnesses or have passed away due to respiratory and cancer and that sort of thing. So while we may be 20 years removed from the event, every day the effects are still being felt. People are sick or passed away, and those families that are still here to grieve and mourn them. And like I said, with that piece of rebar on my desk, there's really, I can't think of many days where I don't think about it. Maybe if I'm traveling, it might be a day or two, but almost every day I think about that event, even 20 years later.
There's a comment in the chat from those back pages about Pathmark. Yeah, it was that long ago. Pathmark. Pathmark was a chain of grocery stores in New Jersey that doesn't exist anymore. So.
Yeah, I remember. I remember.
Shout out to Eric.
Yeah. I don't know if anyone else. I know Brad shared his and got a little choked up, and it's I get choked up too. To this day, and That's okay. That's emotion. It means you care. It means you're affected by it. There's nothing to be ashamed about when it comes to emotions. And so, if anyone wants to come on and share.
Just to interrupt, Brad also let us know in our group chat that he's also thinking about his father.
Yeah.
So it was a double whammy for him. As I said, that my dad had his fall, which I didn't mention. My dad had the fall about 6 weeks afterwards. So he was never really able to be by himself again. And so it's the same. So, for me, it's the same memory, in a way, it's the same memory. I never was able to see my dad whole again, and so Brad started thinking about his father, and, I can see why it's been an emotional time for him. And this just brings back the searing memories of the emotional time. And it's hard. I mean, he does these podcasts 3 times a week, and I listen occasionally. I listened a little bit this morning to his Friday podcast. And, he shares a lot on that. But no matter how much you share, it's still hard. I mean, his wife's out of town right now with some of her friends. So he's by himself, and it's one of the hardest things to do is reflect by yourself. And I know he's very strong in his faith, but even sometimes that you need a little help along the way. And so we all need to keep remembering that for him, the grief is a constant struggle.
Yeah, it's tough.
Yeah.
It's tough. There's no wrong way to grieve. I know, Rich, you and it's true. You say, may the person's memory be a blessing. May everyone's memory on 9/11 be a blessing. As traumatic of an event that is, you got those folks and need to think of all those memories and as blessings, even though they may be shorter than they should have been, obviously. The one thing I want to, definitely, say is, like I said already, whether it be a friend, a relative, an acquaintance, if you, tell them you love them if you love them, thank people, let people know how you feel about them, especially if it's positive. I mean, if it's negative, that's up to you. But, because you just don't know, when our time is up. And I want to know that, everything I needed to say, or at least I hope so, is said. So there's no doubt in anyone that I care about's mind what I think and feel about them. And so I encourage everybody. Sometimes people have a hard time doing that, but I think it's important. We also have to keep going, right? Those folks that I think about all those service personnel, fire department, EMTs, paramedics, police, and others that kept going, went into that building knowing there was a chance they may not come back out. And I think it's a testament to us that are still living to keep going and live the best lives we can and help others. I think there's a message in there too, to help others as much as possible. I try to do that with content and hobby. I try to do that in real life stuff too. And I think that's an important message, that we can honor the memories of those people who gave the ultimate sacrifice on that day.
Another thing too is that I used to be in the Air Force, and in '99 is when I got discharged. And after 9/11, I mean, I was still at a point where I could still have been recalled back to active duty, even though I had been out for over 2 years. And I'd spent probably a year and a half after 9/11 waiting for the call that I would be recalled to active duty again. And I mean, it never came, but still.
Yep. Couple notes in chat I want to share. Again, if you don't want to come on, you want to type in chat, I'll read it for you. Well, this one's from Torsten Bauer. Torsten says, I remember coming from school and there was a package of cards in the mail. I wanted to sort them into my folder, and switched on the TV. Then I saw that a horrible accident had happened to the World Trade Center. Um, Royals 417 says, thanks for sharing. I was in my 5th year of teaching government at a high school in Kansas. I had a student whose father worked at the United Nations, and I remember her emotions on that day, not knowing who he was. And we all have, those kind of stories, whether we knew somebody directly or indirectly. I remember, going to school in New York City when the list of those that were killed came out. I remember reading every single name on that list to see if just anything sounded familiar. Did I know anybody, even if I wasn't in contact with them still? Your curiosity wants to find that out. But there's so many indirect connections too. We all know. So even if you have a family member who's a member of armed forces, fire department, police, paramedics, it affects you knowing what they do every day. My nephew is a firefighter in Philadelphia. Wasn't at the time. He was young, but it's scary to think, any given day, God forbid, something could happen. And so to all those people who still serve in the military today, paramedics, fire, uh, police, every service industry like that. I hope someone's watching over them and blessing them. One of the we know the TSA today. TSA, if you travel, is we sort of take them for granted. A lot of people don't realize they were born out of these events 20 years ago, and so we even them, sometimes we don't like them when they're looking through our luggage, but they're doing a job, right? I rather they look through my bag at the airport. I don't know what they're going to find other than probably some top loaders and some cards, but I don't have a problem with that if it makes transportation safer for everyone on that plane or vehicle that's for travel. And it's a necessary now with those events of 9/11 that they were able to carry out that attack that easily. I don't have a problem with someone checking my stuff if it makes everybody, including myself, safer.
Absolutely. I see we're approaching the top of the hour. Does anybody have any closing comments they want to make?
I see one here from Herman in chat. I was shut up in a warehouse with no contact to the outside when rumors start spreading from drivers coming in. And there's all sorts of stories, like Rich said, you only had like really one channel. Herman right there said he was getting his news from people, coming in from outside, kind of filling in details. And then if you ever have that happen, someone's giving you details, you sometimes you're not sure what to believe. Not that they're being disingenuous, but are they getting the right story? It's like the fish, and so you don't know what's going on, even though you're being told, and that's scary as well. Brad with a comment, which I echo, to all our servicemen and women who are watching. Thank you for your service. To everyone who has lost loved ones, my hearts and prayers are with you and your family. And those folks are on the front lines, whether it's in an ambulance, a police car, a jet, a tank, a Jeep. It doesn't matter. They're defending our freedoms and our country, and they're on those front lines. They're in harm's way in many cases, and it's not one day. That's 365, 24/7. We're talking about them today, specifically in detail, but they're doing that on September 12th. They're doing that on December 20th, and all that. So we need to recognize that each and every day.
So let me ask you guys a question. They made the unprecedented decision to ground the entire U.S. airline fleet, do you think that this could have been a greater tragedy if they had not done that? I mean, does anybody know that or has ever heard if there was ever any more hijackers on other planes?
Logan, there
Well,
was a
I think when they grounded those planes, we would have figured out if there was a fifth plane that there were hijackers on it. So,
now there were reports that there were other attempts in the works. I don't know if they were substantiated, but there, anyone can report anything.
yeah.
But it was reported that by doing that, they believe, quote air quotes, they believe they thwarted other attempts by them planes never getting off the tarmac. So
Well,
I don't know. Yeah, go ahead, Rich.
I will tell you, in December, I went to visit my father for the holidays. And on a Thursday night, I was flying back. In Newark Airport, they had started a new policy, take off your shoes. And of course, they didn't know how to implement it. So it took forever and a day. And I'm frustrated like heck trying to get to my flight. Like, it's taking forever and a day. And Newark Airport's busy. Remember, this is a Thursday night. The shoe bomber was that Saturday.
Yeah.
So they knew 2 days in advance to tell people to take off their shoes before we knew about a shoe bomber.
Yep.
So something was going on. And I think, to Logan's point, I would not be surprised if someone had some information to say, let's do this. And the amazing thing was, I believe the director of the FAA, that was his first day on the job.
Yeah, I remember that.
He got it. And Aaron Brown of CNN, that was his first day doing anchoring for CNN, and he had to go live from a rooftop. There were various people who literally, and even, why are you beginning your job on a Tuesday? Most people begin their job on a Monday, but think about it. These two people were beginning their job on a Tuesday.
Yeah.
And it's not the day after Labor Day. That you could understand why you're beginning your job the day after Labor Day. You're beginning your job on a Tuesday, on a random Tuesday.
I was watching the show. I was watching a lot of shows last night pertaining to the events. One of the show talked about the FAA and some of the flight stuff. And then an Air Force pilot on, female, her name escapes me, I apologize. But she was in the air doing surveillance, speaking to Logan's point, she said that her role in the air was in case they determined there were, one of the things all the air traffic controllers did was whoever was still in the air during this time of the events, they made contact with all those planes and contacted the pilots and made sure, obviously, they were still in control of the plane. Well, this Air Force service woman pilot said her job was to stay in the air, and if any one of those planes was not in control of the pilot it should have been, she was awaiting orders. And one of those orders, she said she's obviously glad it never had to happen, but she said, I was prepared to do it, was not even to whatever Air Force plane she was in, she said there was no weaponry on it, no machine guns, no missiles, and her role would have been to take out the tail of any hijacked plane to make sure it didn't reach her target. And she said, I could, while I'm parachute, I have a parachute, and I can eject as quick after initiating contact with that commercial plane if need be. I could potentially lose my life in that operation, and I was prepared to do that to save who knows how many others. And she said, I'm glad I didn't have to, but it was touch and go there. And it's those stories like that. And, and when Logan said that about were there other things thwarted by having all the commercial flights obviously grounded, I think that kind of illustrates the government wasn't sure. That's why they contacted all the planes that were still in midair and said, "Hey, what's your status? Are you in control of your flight?"
There's a great book called, and I've not read the book, but I've read the excerpts, "The Only Plane in the Air." And apparently that day in the South, there were a bunch of crop duster planes of people who hadn't heard. And they said, we never would have known there were so many crop duster planes, and they're doing their job. And, and they discovered, okay, get everybody, just finish your job today, or you're done for today, and just pick it up in a couple of days. But there was a lot of that going on too. And it's kind of scary because the president, if you remember, is in Florida teaching doing an education initiative for a bunch of kids, and CNN actually recently just did a feature on these kids 20 years later, which is a fascinating story, and their teacher too, who keeps in touch with them, because some of these kids kept on blaming themselves for the reason the president stopped stopped the lesson. But they have to figure out where the president's going to go, and is he going back to Washington? Is he going to Crawford? Is he going somewhere else? And think about the logistics. If you and we're doing our logistics, think about the logistics of flying the president safely back somewhere in that situation.
Yeah.
He actually flew for a while to Offutt Air Force Base in Nebraska.
But they also went to Barksdale Air Force.
Yeah, they went to Barksdale first, but Offutt's the base that I was stationed at for 3 years, and it was the home of the Strategic Air Command for a while, and one of the few safe places that was nuclear bomb proof that they could take the president. So,
right, and so you have to protect him under those circumstances. It's things we don't know about that are absolutely, astounding. You don't think about that, but he's doing presidential things. And think about on that morning, he woke up thinking he's going to teach a bunch of kids. He doesn't realize he's going to have to make a bunch of really consequential, even if they're short talks, that day and that night. And that day, all of a sudden, he went from being president to being truly commander in chief, which he was for the next few years. And even though there may have been some missteps, he acted as if he was commander in chief, and that's what you want.
Yeah. And I think, one thing I remember the few weeks after 9/11 too. Like I said, I'm in Syracuse at the time. I live right near the airport. There's commercial flights going on normal days. Left and right over my house. You can hear them. And it was eerie, those couple weeks, without hearing a plane in the sky. Even the jets stopped. I mean, I'm sure they went where they had to go and were redeployed somewhere else. But you couldn't find a plane in the sky here. And it was eerie. I remember just thinking it was eerie. There's a comment I want to go back to. I missed it, but I don't want to miss it. Put it up here. This is from Eric Perry. He says, I was in a government building in Delaware that day. Even though the evacuation was somewhat orderly, the overall chaos of the day was clearly evident. At the time, no one knew what else would happen next. Yeah, like we said, we didn't know what was. All sorts of thoughts are going through everyone's mind. What if this is, going to be a nationwide kind of coordinated effort, and it's scary. From Royals 417, my classes watch news coverage the rest of the day. Our students today were not even born, so it's important we provide ways to remember these events, no doubt. Daniel Busby, and thanks, folk, for those who are putting these comments. Even if you don't want to come on, we can share these comments. When the fighter jets took off to find Flight 93, no jets had missiles. The lady in jets said they were told to take the plane down. She said she meant the only thing they said it would have crashed into it. Yep, that's the show I saw. She was prepared to do that. She was prepared to potentially give her own life for the greater good of the country. And I mean, imagine being in a jet yourself. You're in control of an Air Force jet, knowing that worst case scenario, you might have to crash the jet. It's probably a lonely space to be in, up at how many thousand feet. You're by yourself with your thoughts and the situation at hand. And part of that situation at hand might include the duty to crash that said jet into a commercial airliner to prevent from hitting its target, knowing not only will you most likely lose your life, but other innocent people on the plane are also going to lose their lives as well. But you're trying to prevent a bigger tragedy from happening. And just
I remember a couple years before 9/11, the golfer Payne Stewart was in a flight, and they were actually tracking, and they realized what had happened, and they were tracking the flight to make sure if that plane was going to land anywhere, crash anywhere where it looked like there would be a whole bunch of people, they were going to shoot the plane down so it wouldn't kill more people. And it was the same general principle. I mean, they had to think about what's going on with this plane, where's it going to crash? Because they knew that nobody was alive on the plane.
Yep.
But they also wanted to make sure that nobody more, nothing more would happen other than to the people who were already dead on that plane. And that's the same principle this lady's talking about. We have to make sure to mitigate and reduce the amount of people who pass, keep more fatalities to a minimum.
Yeah, no doubt. It's crazy to even think about those kind of decisions that have to be made a spur of the moment as well. And you hear the going back to the firefighters. You hear, when you hear all the stories. I've never heard a story where a firefighter turned around and ran away from the events and their duties, and knowing again that it could be the end, and just a crazy day. It's I think I speak for most when it's something we'll never forget. Like Royals 417 said, it's important even for those folks that weren't around at the time. My son Jordan was literally an infant and doesn't remember the event. He knows obviously about it now, and from talking about it and watching shows pertaining to the day. And I think it's important, as bad as that day was, it's part of our history, and we need to never forget and share it with those that come after as well. All right, it's we went we're at 107. I don't know if anyone has anything they want to kind of close with. I'll go last, but if anyone else wants to close with anything.
There's a small town in Newfoundland called Gander. It's in the middle of nowhere, but it's known for being the first spot of land that you cross over on a lot of the North Atlantic flight paths. And in the era before large jumbo jets, this would be the last fuel stop before you crossed over the Atlantic or came from the Atlantic. And so they had a 2.5-mile runway there at their airport. And on 9/11, when the FAA gave the order to stop all air traffic, a lot of the planes that were in the air going toward the United States and Canada were forced to land somewhere. And that somewhere was this small town in the middle of nowhere in Newfoundland called Gander. And for almost days, even weeks, the people of Gander really opened their hearts and opened their houses to feed and shelter all these strangers going to and from Europe and the Americas. So shout out to the people of Gander on 9/11. I say that because I can trace my ancestry to Newfoundland.
Okay.
Another comment too, I want to read because I think it's important. Torsten Bauer again, who is from Germany, says, even we in Germany were so touched the next day. A woman that rode the same bus for years, and we never talked to each other, expressed to me her sadness and asked me how I felt about that event. And so even though that this happened here, the effects of it happen worldwide. People said, hey, this could happen. If it happened there, it can happen anywhere. The U.S. military is arguably the strongest in the world, and the fact that this happened on our soil, other countries too probably said, hey, this, it didn't happen to us this time, but it can happen to us, and affected the whole world, even though it was a United States event.
Okay, and I just want to read something which is common in both Judaism and Christianity. And I think it provides comfort and emphasizes reliance on God. The Lord is and feel free to join in. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He has me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He revives my soul. He guides me on paths of righteousness for his glory. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no harm. For you are with me. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall abide in the house of the Lord forever.
Amen.
Amen.
Psalm 23.
Yes. And for those that are not with us, we're going to join you someday, and we hopefully don't fear the journey.
Yeah. In closing, I'll keep it brief, folks. Again, it's kind of what I already said. Never forget those we lost on that day, and those affected. Those not just the folks we lost, but those families, and everyone's affected. And again, you never know when our number's up. Again, please tell folks, especially positive things, how you feel about them. Let them know.
Yeah, and I just want to say one thing. I just want to let all the first responders, police, fire, emergency responders, doctors, nurses, everyone in the medical community, everyone that helped that day and continues to help people to this day, how much we love, respect, and appreciate everything that you do.
Yeah, and then you had the pandemic in there too, Logan, as well. Yeah. All right, folks. I hope we did the show justice with today's remembrances. I know it was a different episode. Next week we'll be back. I'm assuming we'll be back and talking about some cards. I'm sure there'll be some news in the hobby between now and then, the way the news cycle is going. But hug a loved one. Tell your kids you love them, your spouse, significant others, people you care about. And we'll see you next week.
Later.